Mad Rockweek's Serial, The Garrison Green Saga, Chapter 17, The Rook Room Aftermath. John and Lerner returned to BCPD at 3:15 p.m. As they moved through the building, conversations died mid-sentence. Eyes followed them, quiet, measuring, already deciding who to blame. No one said a word. They entered the Rook Room to find Dr. Abigail Kinsley alone, sorting through the handful of evidence bags that had survived the fire. "I heard," she said softly as they stepped inside. "Quite a few people are looking for the both of you right now." She wasn't twisting the knife, just naming the shape of it. John dropped into the supervisor's chair at the front desk, leaned his head back and pushed off with his foot. The chair spun, the ceiling smeared into motion as the room tilted and swayed around him. Lerner stood at the table, staring down at nearly 20 evidence bags spread like casualties. His eyes moved over them without landing anywhere. He slammed his palm onto the table. "Fucking kid, couldn't wait a damn week before deciding to grow balls?" He turned to Abby, desperation bare on his face, silent, pleading, looking for anything that still mattered. She read him instantly. There was nothing. Lerner's shoulders sagged. He leaned forward until his forehead hit the table with a dull, final sound. Silence swallowed the room. The only noise was the squeak of John's chair as it slowly lost momentum. Then a voice cut through it. John's stomach dropped before the chair even stopped spinning. Mayor Moores stood in front of them. "I came here to yell at you," he said flatly, "but I don't even know where to start." He looked at the three of them, betrayal carved deep into his face. He exhaled sharply. "Fuck you guys." The words hung there. Moores turned away, pacing a few steps, staring at the wall like it might explain itself if he looked hard enough. Then he spun back, hands on his hips, leaning forward, eyes pleading more than accusing. "What the hell did you do?" From beneath the table, Lerner groaned. "We didn't start the fire." Moore dropped his head, dragged a hand down his face, and straightened and began pacing again. "All right, enough Bruce Springsteen," he snapped. "I've spent the last few hours explaining why our very expensive lead is currently burning to the ground. After calling in every favor I had, after other people put their asses on the line for you, this is what I get?" He threw his arms up. This right here." "We still have some evidence," John said weakly, gesturing toward the bags. Moore snapped toward him. "Don't you try that bloody knife bullshit with me, you fuck." His eyes shifted to Lerner. They stopped at the bulge halfway down his right thigh. Moore stepped closer and slapped it. Lerner hissed, grabbing his leg, jaw locking tight. "So," Moore said quietly, his voice sharpening, "that explains why the lab kept coming back inconclusive." "We needed time," Lerner said hoarsely. "You wouldn't have understood." "So it's done," Moore said, throwing up his hands. "For anyone in this room who hates their career, this is fantastic news." He stopped and scanned the room. Where the fuck are the two others? John looked around, realizing he didn't know. Moore saw it immediately. "Are you fucking kidding me?" he snapped, his voice cracking. John pulled out his phone and started calling Joe. Abby watched him, then spoke carefully. "They're following up on something for me." Moores dropped his head again, then forced a crooked smile. "Explain yourself, woman." "I didn't want to say anything until I confirmed it," Abby said. "I sent them back to Greenville." Moore barked a laugh. "The place everyone's searched for 20 years? He shook his head, chuckling like a man coming apart. "At least your lead didn't burn down a city block." He looked at her sharply. "It didn't, right?" "I don't think so," Abby said. Moores leaned in, eyes wide. "As a respected doctor of psychology, why the fuck would you do that?" "City lines changed," Abby said evenly. After talking with a local historian, I learned Greenville and Crosstown lost land when the state boundaries shifted nearly 50 years ago. It seemed worth pursuing. Moores closed his eyes. I'm going to pretend you didn't just tell me you sent officers across state lines. What I did hear is that we might have leads tied to the public records error, possibly connected to the Greenville fire. He turned to leave, then stopped and faced Abby alone. You're confident this will produce something real? She met his eyes and lied again. I'm sure. He nodded once. You better be. After he left, they waited until his footsteps faded down the hall. Abby exhaled and turned to John. Where's Joe? John held up his phone, still ringing. No answer. Lerner looked at Abby with genuine admiration. Good call, Doctor. She nodded, tension easing slightly. Joe said he tried to tell you yesterday. He said you were, quote, dicks about it. John looked down. We were wrapped up with Author's Point. Lerner nodded grimly. He hadn't listened either. John lowered the phone. He won't answer. The unease in his voice spread through the room like a stain. Where the fuck is Joe? Chapter 18. Joe and Eric find something. Oh shit! Joe screamed, tore through the headset as the helicopter dropped out of the sky. God damn it, Joe! Eric shouted over the intercom, wrestling the controls as he fought the sudden fall. We just said not to scream into the microphone. Pussy, Barney laughed from the back seat. Eric Curry, Joe, and Barney had gone to high school together. Back then they got high, got drunk, and made terrible no-budget movies that no one but them ever saw. When Joe and Barney went into police work, Eric took over his father's aerial surveying company. Flying with old friends was a good excuse to reconnect, and to do stupid things. The helicopter dipped again. Joe started to scream, caught himself halfway, clamped his mouth shut so hard his jaw ached. His fist locked around the armset. Joe, Barney barked through clenched teeth. The chopper plunged towards the treetops, blades chewing the air, before Eric pulled it up hard. The ground rushed close enough to feel personal. They'd been doing this all day. Diving, climbing, skimming. They'd refueled twice already and were running low again. Sorry guys, Eric said, steadying them. I don't have time to refuel her again. He wished he did. He loved this. Loved flying with them. But he had a private charter booked in 3 hours. One more time, Barney shouted. Eric glanced at Joe, then grinned. The helicopter climbed higher than it had all day, engine screaming as it rose. Joe shivered. He knew what was coming. Still climbing. Y'all ready? Eric asked, grin widening as he pushed the speed. Before either of them could answer, he nosed the helicopter down. The fall felt longer than any before. Joe's eyes went wide as the earth rushed up to meet them. Every instinct screamed for him to yell, but he swallowed it, teeth locked tight. Okay, man, Barney groaned. That's enough. The helicopter began to shake. No, not playful vibrations, not turbulence, something worse. Eric, Barney shouted, you dick, stop. Eric pulled up hard, the chopper leveled out just above the tree line. Skimming so low, Joe could swear he saw branches reaching for them. Stop, Joe yelled, voice cracking. Eric eased back, thinking Joe had finally broken. It's cool, man, we're not crashing. No, Joe pointed down, frantic. Stop. Eric followed Joe's gaze and slowed the helicopter into a careful hover, circling wide. Below them, barely visible through the dense canopy, was a rooftop. Not a cabin, not a shed, a roof. The three men stared down at it in silence. Joe pulled out his phone, 8 missed calls, all from John. He tried calling back, forgetting how useless phones were inside a screaming machine. Joe, Eric said, tapping the fuel gauge, we gotta go. John, Joe shouted into the phone, hearing nothing but static and rotors. Take a picture, Barney said, from the back, pale now, no jokes left. Hurry, Eric urged, eyes flickering between the trees and the gauge. Joe leaned out as far as the harness would allow and snapped a photo. Go, he said. Eric pulled away. As the helicopter climbed, Joe sent the image to John. For the first time since joining the team, Joe felt something unexpected settle into his chest. Pride. They hadn't stumbled onto this. They hadn't been handed it. They found something real. And for once, he knew they earned their place. Chapter 19, Crossing the Line. Barney's aluminum boat tore down the Nevers River at a blistering 10 miles an hour. Everyone on board wondered if they could go any faster. No one asked. The morning had already gone to hell. They were supposed to be on the water by 7. It was 9. Tension had been high before they even left the ramp at Port Nevers Park. Barney's kid had been sick. Joe was late because Joe's always late. Barney owned exactly 2 adult life vests and 1 child-size one. He was also quietly doing the math on whether the boat could hold 4 grown men, their gear, and enough fuel to matter. Each problem sparked short, sharp arguments, snapping tempers. Nobody won any of them. But none of this was the real issue. Neither Joe nor Barney knew how to get back to the structure they'd spotted from the air. All they knew was that it sat somewhere between Crosstown and Greenville, buried among a scatter of islands near the swamp where the 3 rivers tangled together. John sat at the bow, knees braced. Joe and Lerner were wedged in the middle. Barney captained from the rear, gripping the motor like it might betray him. "You know," John said, raising his voice over the wind, "you guys are lucky you didn't get nailed for crossing into another agency's airspace." Joe leaned forward. "It's fine. Eric runs an aerial surveying company. Told them we were tracking spike and alligator populations." John glanced down at the few thin inches of aluminum separating them from the river. Joe clapped him on the back and laughed. It took nearly 40 minutes to reach the Crosstown-Greenville boundary, and far more fuel than Barney had planned on. He was grateful for the extra 5-gallon can. Then the search began. By noon, they'd circled nearly every island shoreline. Nothing. No structures, no smoke, no signs of life. Hunger crept in. Hope thinned. Fuel disappeared faster than optimism. Then the engine sputtered. The boat lurched. Silence followed. Every eye turned to Barney. He answered with a raised middle finger as the motor died. "Shit." Joe jumped up, grabbing his phone and nearly capsizing them. Sorry. John shifted fast, redistributing weight. "What about Google Earth?" Phones came out together. No signal. Hope didn't go quietly. Barney poured the reserve fuel into the tank. "How far does that get us?" John asked. "Maybe halfway back," Barney said, "for 2 of us." "Pull onto the bank," Lerner said. Joe rocked the boat again. "What do you see?" "Nothing," Lerner snapped, "which is exactly what we'll keep seeing if we stay in this damn boat." They drifted ashore. Barney handed Joe a paddle. "I'll cross the island," Lerner said, already stepping out. "You circle and pick me up." Joe and Barney exchanged looks. John followed Lerner onto the bank. Their shoes soaked through immediately. "At least it's lighter," Joe muttered as they paddled away. "What are you thinking?" John asked as they moved through the trees. "I'm thinking aerial perspectives doesn't mean shit once you're on the ground," Lerner said, "and I've got no idea how many islands out here there are." They drew their sidearms and moved quietly. The forest thinned quickly, no buildings, no shelter. They holstered. John's stomach growled. "You too?" Lerner pressed his hand to his gut. "I'm starving." They reached the opposite shore where Joe and Barney were lounged in the boat. "Took you long enough," Joe said. "Thought the gray man got you." Lerner nearly stumbled climbing back in. John noticed the tremor in his hands. "To the next island, Captain Barnes?" Joe shouted. John watched Lerner swipe sweat from his brow. "New plan," John said. "Take us back to the Greenville shoreline." Barney didn't argue. 8 minutes later, old dock pilings rose from the water. John pointed. "That island." Barney nodded and guided them in. "Okay," John said, grabbing his mag light. "We screwed this up." He handed Barney his credit card. Bigger gas cans. Fill both. Food, water, flashlights, and energy drinks, Lerner added. John turned to Joe. Call Abby the moment you get signal. Tell her we've secured the structure and we're collecting evidence. The mood shifted. Sarcasm drained out of the boat. As Barney and Joe pulled away, John turned to Lerner. You okay? I've been worse, Lerner said, smiling. He was lying. They stepped onto the shoreline of white sand. Wrong somehow, too clean, nothing like the red-brown soil they'd seen everywhere else. I'm dead weight, Lerner admitted. First time I've ever felt my age. Get some shade, John said. I'll scout. Lerner hesitated and sat beneath an oak. Just a minute. John moved fast and careful, gun up. The woods thickened. No trails, no trash, no footprints. Panic stirred. He stopped, breathed, and listened. Water. He followed the sound and broke through onto another beach, facing a second island less than 50 yards away. Thunder rolled. You've got to be kidding me, John muttered. Johnny. Lerner stood across the way, grinning. Sandbar, he shouted. John spotted it, barely visible beneath the surface. He waded knee-deep across. Lerner stood there, holding his shoes in one hand and a yellow piece of fruit in the other, color back in his face. That's not old dock pilings, Lerner said. It's a bridge, John finished. They looked at each other, both racing to say what came next. The puzzle was finally aligning, and for the first time, they were standing on the right ground. Chapter 20, New Tree Island. Lerner finished off 2 more pieces of orange fruit plucked from the sprawling bush 20 feet inland. Juice ran down his wrist. John took his time with the first, chewing slowly, fighting hunger with the bittersweet citrus whose name he didn't know and didn't care to learn. He didn't like the taste, but he liked the hunger even less. As his stomach settled, something about the island began to bother him. The farther inland he looked, the thinner the vegetation became. John stood and moved away from Lerner, leaving the older detective resting against the brush. The woods were easy to move through, too easy. He nearly tripped over a massive oak sprawled across the path, its trunk split and soft. One shove and his boot sent flakes of wood crumbling like paper. The tree had been dead for decades. John looked up. Most of the standing trees were pines. Tall, straight, young, none of them had thickened trunks of age. No giants, no anchors. He pictured what must have been once oaks, elms, and fruit trees, a grove meant to feed a family long gone. Whatever happened on the island had erased the old forest. He turned back toward the fruit bush, thoughts drifting. Lerner was gone. Sonny, John called, his hand already on his gun. Panic hit fast and sharp, dragging Garrison Green's name to the front of his mind like a curse. Over here, Lerner called. Relief crashed through him. John followed the voice through dense brush and broke out onto a red sand beach. Lerner stood shin deep in the water, staring across at an island 70 yards away. John followed his gaze. The opposite shore was wrong. There was no beach, no gentle slope. The water met the forest abruptly, trees packed so tightly they swallowed sunlight. The woods looked solid, sealed. Excitement rippled through John. That's it. Watch your step, Lerner said. John took 5 steps before he understood. A slab of stone jutted from the sand. He dropped to his knees and brushed away wet grit. I think we found it, Lerner said, already moving off with boyish energy. It took John less than 5 minutes to clear the stone, 3 feet by 2, rounded edges, concrete, immovable, anchored deep. Lerner returned carrying 2 long bamboo poles. He tossed one to John and waded back into the river. John watched him probe the water blindly for nearly 10 minutes. Finally, he said, "A bridge." Lerner stopped. "Go on." "Another bridge? Like Greenville, but stone?" Even as he spoke, John heard the flaws. A stone bridge wouldn't go unnoticed. The Green family didn't build monuments to secrecy. He turned, expecting disappointment. Instead, Lerner was standing on the water, balanced. Moments ago, the river had reached his waist. "I think you're close," Lerner said, grinning. John stepped in, curiosity briefly overpowering fear. Lerner hopped forward, still only shin deep. Something bumped John's leg. Fear roared back. He jumped, heart slamming. Muddy water swallowed his calves. He hated water he couldn't see through. Always had. It wasn't the water. It's what lived in it. "Hey," he yelled. Lerner was already half across. John lowered the bamboo and felt concrete beneath him. He climbed onto the pillar. 2 feet wide, 3 feet long. Another waited 2 feet away. He kicked off his boots. They'd become anchors, and leapt barefoot. Pain exploded in his foot as it hit jagged stone. He wobbled, barely catching balance. The bamboo slipped from his grip and vanished into the current. "This is a bridge," John laughed, breathless. "Just not above water." 2 feet apart, Lerner shouted. Thunder rolled closer. John jumped, landed. His toe screamed. Blood clouded the water red. He looked down. His foot was split open. Another thunderclap rippled the river. Then he saw it, an alligator gliding away. This is why he hated muddy water. Adrenaline took over. John leapt, scrambled, leapt again, his gun in his hand without remembering drawing it. He reached Lerner at the far bank. Together they clawed up slick stone and roots, bleeding and soaked until they collapsed on solid ground. Rain began to fall. They moved inland and stopped. A stone wall rose before them, 10 feet high, smothered in ivy and moss, hidden by a century of neglect. They followed it to a collapsed canal, wide once, wide enough for ships, pirate ships, slave ships. At the end stood a stone archway rising from rubble. A steel plate lay beneath it. The words were still readable. The Green Plantation. Neither man spoke. Beyond the arch loomed the structure. 3 stories of rotten shadow. Not a house, a fortress, a bunker. Thunder cracked overhead. "This is it," Lerner whispered, reverent, consumed. John saw it then. Not brilliance, not legacy, but a broken man chasing meaning. "Lawson," John shouted as the rain poured harder. "We're here," Lerner insisted. "This is the missing piece." John's gut tightened. This wasn't about Garrison. It was about obsession. "We have to go back," John said. "Joe and Barney will come back." "In this?" Lerner laughed. "They'll wait out the storm." "No," John snapped. "They'll come." Silence stretched. "I can't go back," Lerner said finally. "I'm too old." "I have to," John said. "I won't leave them." "Go," Lerner said gently. "I'll be here." John hesitated, then turned away. "I'll be back." "I know," Lerner said, smiling. John headed for the river, regret heavy in every step as the storm closed in and swallowed the island whole.